we're now back online. Thank you for waiting. Hopefully you'll be switched to this stream. We've all got some rain coming, so we're just gonna we'll crack on for about another 15 minutes, and hopefully the rain, temperature, and everything stays with us. I'm just gonna open the comment section, and very much looking forward to some of those comments coming through. Also, I can see from online that we're just waiting for everybody to find out where we are and redirect us. But people will be able to backtrack. So, Choy, did you see any of those sort of the questions that were coming up from Australia?
Yeah. So there was, I mean, there was a couple about the bleaching, and like I said, the bleaching is a much bigger thing. So we really want to change our behaviors, and you want to be thinking, you know, alternative energy is a big thing, and that's something we've really got to focus on. Basically, the amount of carbon dioxide we're dumping in the atmosphere, we've got to reduce that. So that's the bottom line in terms of the coral bleaching, because once we lose the reef, and because the Australian guys were listening in, I mean, obviously the barrier reef is a well-known icon around the world, and the whole sort of northern side of that is in quite a state of peril right now. And the nice thing about somewhere like Bermuda is we actually have a cooler winter, so because the temperature drops seasonally, our coral is allowed to recover, whereas the more tropical places like up in Queensland, they don't really get a chance to recover off of a warming cycle as we would.
And if you're looking at Australia, the Queensland, the tropical North Queensland, that sort of pointy bit going up the east coast, as those northerly corals really suffering.
Yeah, and I've been there. I've dove on the barrier reef probably a decade ago, and it was stunning. And to think that that is going, or a lot of it is gone, is just is heartbreaking, because it's one of the most spectacular underwater scenes that I've ever seen.
Very, very sad. And on an individual basis, it's then looking at what we can do to reduce our own emissions.
Yes.
And then, I mean, how can science link to and help the public be activists and ask government to make changes that we want to see?
Yeah, I think a lot of it boils down to you've got to get experts involved in a lot of the policy making as well. Particularly on this side of the world, it can be a challenge, but I know a lot of the smaller countries, it tends to be, I guess, easier. I don't know, they seem to be making, places like Canada and Australia and some of the Scandinavian countries seem to be making a bit better progress, maybe because they have smaller populations. I think a lot of it boils down to the education. So we've got to sort of take lead and help some of the countries that are maybe a little less fortunate to sort of show them the way forward, because you have to be in a good place to be able to apply this technology, and in a lot of countries unfortunately aren't. So
it's just checking through.
Sure.
So we've got some coming up, and if we can retype the last questions, just asking the office in London to retype some of the last questions so we can see those coming up, that would be really kind.
Yeah, somebody had asked about after the making the documentaries and the TV series, do I think it's changed the behavior? And I definitely think it has locally. I mean, people stop all the time, and because it's a small place, they recognize my face, they ask me a bunch of questions. So it's definitely made people think more about it. Also, the nice thing is there's so much amazing nature footage online, and everyday people's amazing encounters that gets put up on something like YouTube, and then millions can see it. So I do think we're a lot more conscientious than we used to be of our natural environment than we were 20 years ago.
And you very kindly brought some of that footage, and I think we're going to be putting it up on the YouTube channel later.
Yeah, a little later on, now once you transfer it. Yes, definitely.
Fantastic. And I'm fascinated by what you've found out about tiger sharks.
Yes.
Because you've put all these tags.
45.
The enormity of actually getting these tags onto the tiger sharks. But what have you found out about their behavior?
What we found, we were tagging them in the summertime, and we weren't sure if they were staying, if they were going deep, because the shark doesn't have to surface. So a shark could, in the winter, they could have potentially gone down to 300 or 500 feet and just hung out there because there's no need for them to surface because they have gills, so they can just stay under the water. But what we did find is we thought they might be going somewhere, and they did. And not only were they going somewhere, but we actually discovered an annual migration of the tiger sharks. So what they did is we tagged them here, and the nice thing about tagging them here is we're already in the middle of the ocean. And with some of the 3-year tracks, we had not only not only a return to a home spot, but a full migration back to Bermuda.
Wow.
So what we found is we actually don't, really have any, Bermudian sharks. Our sharks tended to be sharks from the Northern Caribbean that were summering here. So what was happening is a lot of sharks from the Bahamas, the Turks and Caicos, the British Virgin Islands were coming up here, and then they were going back
summer holidays in Bermuda.
Was,
okay.
as you do. Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah. So what they would do is go from wherever their home range was in the winter up to Bermuda, do a quick summer stop off, and then do a lap around. So they were doing this counterclockwise circle around the Atlantic.
And is there a reason for that? Are they following a warm water current? Are they following a prey that they like?
Well, it seems that the cue of warm water, warm water was the cue for them. So we found at about 80 degrees, roughly, once it hit about 80 degrees Fahrenheit, they would follow that gradient up. And as the ocean warmed in the North Atlantic, they would go, because the highest points would be when the ocean, their highest movements north would be when the ocean was warmest, and then as it cooled they would return. So just as a rough estimate, that was about it. And one thing we found that was really interesting, telling the boys from the girls, is virtually every shark we have here is a male. So what happened is, which doesn't make sense in terms of breeding, and this is one of our initial things, we're finding all these males going, this is weird. The females of the tiger sharks tend to stay in the Caribbean, and they're pregnant with babies. The average female tiger shark litter is about 40 sharks. So 40 1-foot-long baby sharks in their stomach.
Wow.
So if you're carrying that as a female, it doesn't make sense to do this huge ocean journey. So they would stay safely in the reef, and the males would all take off in the summer, almost like a boys trip, and they go off and they find food sources. And if you think from an evolutionary point of view, it makes sense, because you've just divided your population in half. So your food stocks are in very good shape. So it's something that the tiger sharks did, and we found it incredibly fascinating.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Got a very important question for a lot of people who are doing science and expeditions. How difficult is the fundraising?
The fundraising is my least favorite bit. The good thing is we're not doing a massive project. I mean, it's fun and exciting, but in terms of budgets compared to a lot of other scientists I know, our project isn't terribly huge to fundraise for, and it's exciting. So I do okay, but I've got to say the fundraising is my least favorite part, and it typically goes well for me here, but I know it can be a big battle. And also too, you've got to get the right people behind you, because not everybody sees the value in science. So trying to show people the value in science and what we're doing can be quite tricky.
Brilliant. And I mean, do you take tourists out at all when they're here? I mean, have you been involved in that side of life in Bermuda?
Not so. In terms of seeing the sharks.
Yeah.
We typically, if people had sponsored trips or donated money, we would try and get that person out. We don't get out quite enough to kind of make it a business. We looked into it a bit, and I tried a few experimental trips, but it definitely it became a little bit of a challenge trying to get people out. You need calm sea conditions. Sometimes the sharks don't show up, so there's a lot of factors that are involved in it. So that didn't work out so well. If we had sharks for a longer period and they weren't just visiting for the summer, I could probably do something on a more commercial venture, definitely.
And I mean, I'm just talking about sort of the wider tourism industry, very connected to the reef here.
Yes.
What do you think impresses people most about visiting the Bermuda, and especially the waters?
Well, our reef is in very good condition here. It's absolutely pristine. I think that's a lot to do with the fact that we are isolated in a corner of the ocean. We don't have a massive population, and the population that we do have is actually quite educated in terms of just pollution. We've got good laws about pollution, about garbage disposal, all these things that you get with a developed country. So we're lucky in that regard, and our reef is in great shape. It's some of the most picturesque I've seen.
Amazing. And there was some questions coming through, like if there is damage to a reef, if these things do happen, can we use something like aquaculture to start to, I mean, are there projects here to reseed the reef?
To reseed the reef? I mean, you could do that. The good thing about Bermuda is our reef is actually, it's in good enough shape that if you did have some damage, I think it would actually reseed itself. And when you do that naturally, it works a bit better. But there are a few projects going on in the world, not so much here, but that I've read about with other people, and they're actually basically they have coral nurseries, and they're growing baby corals, and then they're reseeding reefs, and that works really well in areas that have been completely decimated by either pollution or just man-made influence. You know, yeah, even dynamite fishing. I know of a project in Indonesia. And unfortunately, they were dynamite fishing, which destroys the whole reef. But then there's a reseeding project, and it's actually having quite a good effect on a reef that's been completely obliterated. Whereas, like I said, ours,
some good news stories.
Some good news stories. Yes, there's few and far between, but there's a couple. Yeah.
Fake news is a term that we hear a lot of the moment. What's the worst fake news shark story you've seen out there?
I can't think of a particular story, but it's when they really focus on the attacks, it's not good all around, because sharks are really important to the ecosystem and they need to be there. But statistically, something like a shark attack is big and scary, so it does sell as a news story. But if you look at it statistically, there's probably about 15 shark deaths worldwide in any given year. Comparatively, 150 people, 10 times the amount, are killed by stray coconuts falling from trees. So technically, a stray coconut is 10 times deadlier than a shark in terms of loss of human life.
And then we're comparing that as well to the numbers of sharks that humans are killing each year.
Yes. Now humans are wiping out somewhere. It's hard to get an exact figure, and with fisheries it's always challenging because you don't get the numbers reported accurately. That's the biggest thing. But it's somewhere between 50 million and 100 million sharks are taken out of the ocean every single year by people. Yet 15 people are killed, but we're killing 50 million sharks on a good year and 100 million on a bad year. So there's probably, you know, if we keep up at that rate in my lifetime, we will potentially see the collapse of sharks. And then it will wreak havoc on the ecosystem, because they're actually designed to keep the fish stocks clean, to keep them trim. Top predators are very, very important in maintaining your ecosystem balance. And once the ecosystem balance is gone, then that combined with things like climate change and ocean acidification are going to wreak absolute havoc on our oceans. So we have the thing is, we have the knowledge. We know what's happening. It's not like we're ignorant of it. We know what's happening. We just need a bit more political will, like you mentioned earlier. And a bit more faith in scientists, because, you know, with this fake news, it seems to be a bit of a doubt of science. And as long as it's a legitimate scientist at a legitimate research institute, university, hospital, whatever you have, as long as it's a legitimate person at a legitimate institute, the science is probably solid.
So if you've got a doctorate in marine biology, and you're at a marine biology institute, and you're answering a question about marine biology, then you probably kind of know what you're talking about.
We can pretty much take that as fact, or at least approaching fact.
And scientists are very, very careful normally.
About
not overstating the case. And
yes, definitely, because scientists have to rely on facts and papers, and things have to be proven and tested. You can't just, you can make a guess, you know, you make a hypothesis, you guess it, but then you have to go prove it. So a scientist is, the most outrageous thing a scientist will do is, I think this based on some previous evidence, so I'm going to try and prove it. That's how crazy they get. That's the craziest they get.
So when they do put something forward, it's normally pretty
Yes,
good.
particularly after some research or an experiment or a paper or observation. Yeah, once something's put down in writing, it's typically pretty solid. Yeah, yeah,
Great. And I think we've just
yeah.
got time for a couple more questions.
Yeah, sure.
Uh, how do we convince policymakers to
Policymakers.
change our environmental practices? Wow.
I think we've got to, to be honest, I think we've got to vote in people that just follow facts, follow logic, have a belief in, you know, in science and technology, and the fact that there are people that know more and are experts in the field, and to take their opinion, because scientists are very bad typically at communicating, because they're not the best communicators, because they're focused on one thing. But what you need is a policymaker that can embrace science and maybe learn from the scientist, smart enough to understand what the scientist is saying, doesn't have to be an expert, just smart enough, and then convey that information and realize that these facts are important in decisions that we make going forward. That's the biggest thing, getting those people in office.
And we can sort of put science and the environment higher up the agenda, just
Very
by
much
our
so.
individual actions.
Yes.
You know, who we vote for, what kind of campaigns we may get involved in. What kind of organisations we join or volunteer for. We can start to show politicians that, in fact, the environment is an issue that should be important to them as well.
Yes, yes. One thing I often notice with the environment is people give it some lip service, and a lot of times it gets pushed down. It's on the list of priorities, but nowhere near the top. But it's the one thing, it doesn't matter, you know, if you're a boy or a girl, or what your social status is, you know, what your religion is, all these other things that we sort of throw in. Every single one of us needs to breathe and needs to drink water. And, you know, it just, we all need a healthy environment. That sort of supersedes almost every other need that we have. We need to grow food. We need, you know, so if we ruin it, then it's our life support system. That's it. Yeah. There is no planet B. That's it. Yeah.
And there's no shark B. So
there's no shark B. Yeah. So once we take out our top predators, then that marine ecosystem may collapse, and then there's no ocean B. You know, so we've got to focus on our priorities, in, you know, in terms of environment. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being part of this talk today.
No problem. It's always great to share some knowledge with people and talk. And thanks for the great questions. They were really good.
And yeah, we've gone all the way from tagging sharks to saving the planet. And the fact that those two aren't that disconnected.
No, they're not at all. So any of the students out there, thanks so much for listening in, and yeah, just get involved. There's a lot of amazing information out there. Find something, everybody likes sharks, but find something you're passionate about and something you can do something about in your local area, and just do it, whether it's as an individual or as a class or a school. You guys just go out and do that, and it'll be amazing. You'll have an amazing time, you'll educate yourselves, and you'll do something really positive. So thanks for listening in.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
Great.
Yeah.